episode number 126 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, being recorded on Tuesday, August 27th, 2024 at 5:56 p.m. I have my water here, I have my hot coffee here, and before I even started recording, my one sticky pad of topics fell into the cup of water, and that's not good. But we're going to move on from that. It's Tuesday. It's release day. We have a lot of, pretty solid releases on the menu today. And in my hand right now, I have a new 4K copy of Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville with Eddie Constantine, Anna Karina, and Kim Timiroff. One of Godard's strongest films, one of his most accessible films, definitely. I would say that a film like this and perhaps Contempt are ones that could be enjoyed even if you are not a fan of some of the more go-to films that people think about when they talk about Godard, the films like Breathless and Masculine, Feminine, of the such. But Alphaville is a wonderful film, one of his very best. I would say this, Pierre Le Fou, and Weekend are the three, maybe not my three favorites, but they're the three that I get the most out of his films. I think they're, actually, I would say probably his three favorites. Now I say that out loud. But there's a lot of good releases today, actually. Actually, pop a little thing here. I can kind of go through a couple that are worth standing out. We've got two Albert Brooks Criterions releasing today. Real Life from 1979 in 4K and Mother from 1996. Oops, sorry. And Real Life's a pretty good movie. It's a pretty good film. It's an enjoyable comedy about looking into the lives of a seemingly ordinary family and Albert Brooks' frustration. It's a very interesting film. And Mother from 1996, which I have not seen, with him and Debbie Reynolds. And those will both be picked up in due time. Also, I wanted to get this as well, but I wanted to not just buy a whole bunch of titles all at once to so I can spread them out and save a little bit of money. But one of my favorite films, last year, Marienbad, directed by Alan Resnais, is also on 4K today from Kino. And I was going to get that, but I already had the Blu-ray, and I didn't already have Alphaville, so I figured I'd get that one in 4K, and I'd upgrade this at some point soon. But last year, Marienbad, one of my very favorite films. It's a film that means a lot to me. It's the kind of film that I find far more compelling and interesting than a lot of other films being put out. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Highly recommended if that will be your thing if you're able to withstand a seemingly non-linear, somewhat experimental, avant-garde at times film. It's a brilliant film. Brilliant stuff. But here we are. It's Tuesday. It's a wonderful day out. The heat is going away, thankfully. It's still a little hot out, but there is a nice cool breeze in the air. This weekend has been very nice, weather-wise, temperature-wise. Being outside, it's warm enough that the bugs aren't a bother, and it's warm enough to not be too hot, not be too cold. You go out, and perhaps you see acquaintances, perhaps you go to the theater, perhaps you go to a museum, or it's just a wonderful time to kind of get out, work on your writing, your reading, any of your artistic endeavors. Really just kind of make the most of it before we get into the winter, and we are all inside, and we are all forced to stay inside unless you want to be out there with the freezing temperatures, which I know as much as I love those freezing days, it's perfect. I get to stay inside and not have to run out and socialize. I can get stuff done, get some films watched. It's brilliant, but we're not going to rush that. We're not going to be talking about, Friday is almost here, the end of the week, and and then you go, oh, the weekend's so by so fast. It's Monday again. Oh, we're going to start all over again. Oh, Friday's here. It's like a never-ending cycle. You want to cherish every day, enjoy every day, take in good art, associate yourself with good people who will have a good impact on your lives, and people who will not just waste your time and mill you about. Those people are just not. Nothing's gonna happen, man. I tell you. I recently was on a strange kick of watching a lot of the worst of reviews from Siskel and Ebert. For whatever reason, I got it recommended to me on YouTube, and I started watching them. I found them entertaining. I typically don't gravitate towards worst of videos or worst of, like people talk about, oh, the worst films of the year, blah blah blah. And I really don't. Actually, I don't talk about my least favorite films of the year. I've seen some stinkers this year. Don't get me wrong. I've seen some real stinkers, but I would never deter somebody from seeing a film they were interested in. So it's not my place to do that. I'd rather kind of lift up films that perhaps you were on the fence on, or perhaps you were already curious about, and kind of give my opinion onto what films are worthy of your time. That's not to say I will not ever, but I just don't see the time or energy or the point to kind of just rag on a film. If there's plenty of other people who are far more concise doing that, and they can do that all I want. That's just not what I'm interested in here, and rather just kind of highlight films like Alphaville, like Last Year Married and Bad, like Real Life. These really wonderful films, very good films. But anyway, so this came up. I happened to just watch a little bit of it, and I found myself intrigued. So from there, I ended up talking with an acquaintance and ended up listening to a recent book about the history of Siskel and Ebert, Opposing Thumbs, written by, let me get the name up right here, by Matt Singer. The book was published in October of 2023, so it is fairly recent at the time of this recording, a little less than a year old, but it was a thoroughly enjoyable audiobook to listen to. I knew that I have 5 books in the other room that are going to be next up read, so I knew that there was not going to be an opportunity to read this anytime soon, but let me get a sip of this coffee here, actually, so my throat's not too dry. But I figured if this is available on Spotify without having to pay for it, because I'm already paying for Spotify, if it's available as an audiobook, then I'm going to listen to it. And by golly, it was good. It was only about 9 hours, so it only took me about 2 or 3 days to kind of get through it all. And it was a very thoroughly enjoyable book. Matt Singer comes from a place of love for Siskel and Ebert, for At the Movies, and for somebody like me who is not very knowledgeable besides the general kind of pop cultural impact that their show had. It was a wonderful insight into a complicated work relationship, two opposites attracting over their love of debating films, and it really, and what's also great at the end of the book, which was really cool to include, is that Matt lists about 10 or 15 films that they were both positive about that have seemingly been forgotten about to time, and some of them I'd seen, some of them I'd heard of, some of them I'd never heard of, so I wrote down the ones that I hadn't, and those will be watched in due time. It's a nice, breezy book, very well written, some minor criticisms, nothing too egregious, but just really a couple criticisms I had was I would say that the book is very weary on any kind of critical analysis, or I would say maybe not critical on that, any kind of criticism of the show. Siskel and Ebert have had their fair share of controversies in the past of just, either their targeting of horror films, or their egregious review of Blue Velvet, where Ebert was saying that Isabella Rossellini was being coerced and being taken advantage of to appear nude, and she had to come out and say this is untrue. I was never coerced in anything. Nothing major controversies, but Siskel and Ebert have they have more lovers than they do detractors, but the detractors I would say have fair points, and I think the book maybe could have didn't have to dwell on it, but at least could have been a bit more into that, a bit more critical of that. Even if I'm not even looking for the author's opinion on whether or not he agrees or disagrees, more so kind of general. Here's where times where their reviews went over the line or something like that, or when they would try to call out the people involved in the film to publicly shame them, which I think is a very inappropriate way of film criticism. And as well, it's not from them so much as let me get some of this water here. It's not so much the writing; it's more so there's a part where they talk about being serious about about poor films wasting their time. They've committed the criminal offense of stealing 2 hours from you. You will never get back. And to me, I find that to be a completely ridiculous statement. I've mentioned this before. When you watch any film or you do anything in life, you are taking a risk on something. If you're going to a restaurant you've never been to before, you're taking a risk on that food being good. If you're reading a book, this idea that you have now wasted my time and I can't get those 2 hours back. You mean, as a film critic, you know full well into what you're getting to, that you're going to see some stinkers. And that's fine. The general audience, everyone sees bad films or films they don't like. But so I mean, how often do you hear people go, "That's 2 hours, I'll never get back"? It's like, well, you made the effort, and you made the risk to knowing that it may or may not be good. But that's part of the fun, because those films that really stick with you really do, and the ones that don't, perhaps you can have a conversation about it later, or maybe it influences your own creative endeavors or anything else. So I think it's just a very asinine way to look at a poor film. I've seen at least 3 films I've seen a lot of films this year, and a lot of new releases. I've seen about, so far, I would say maybe 125, 119, I'm sorry. I've seen 119 films in theaters this year so far. I would say only 4, I would say that was really bad. That was, in fact, almost terrible. Actually, one of them I would say, no. 3 of them I would say are terrible. 3 are terrible. Yeah, let's just do that. 3 are terrible. Terrible films I never want to watch again. Do I feel my time was wasted? Absolutely not. Am I going to sit there and go, oh, it took 2 hours of my life? Absolutely not. I walked into those cinemas knowing full well these could be good, these could be bad. And you know what? I've seen so many more films this year that I've loved. I saw a film recently that I might talk about that I loved, and that is part of the risk. And that's not about the writing of the book itself. It's more so kind of a poor criticism of any kind of artistic medium. If you listen to an album, you can go, that's 40 minutes, I won't get back. It's like, well, that could have also been 40 minutes that changed the rest of your life. And if you're not willing to take that risk, then just don't listen to music, don't watch films. I don't have to tell you. But it's a wonderful book overall. I think Matt Singer's a very strong writer. I'm looking at some of his other work here. It looks like he's done a book on James Cameron and a book on Spider-Man. And that's very cool. Check it out. The audiobook's available. Also narrated by him, which is very cool. I like when authors narrate their own audiobooks to kind of get a sense of, kind of getting certain dialogues back and forth. He's not trying to do an impersonation of either Siskel or Ebert, but more so kind of emphasizing certain words that perhaps another narrator may not. But excellent book, even if you're not a fan of the show. I think it's still worth reading, and I'm very interested to check out the Life Itself documentary that was posthumously released after Roger Ebert's passing. And the book at the end kind of goes into about the documentary itself, but very good stuff. Very good book. So I guess we have recent films. I will say that I've seen some good films recently. I've seen some not so good films recently, but one of my favorite films I've seen this year, I was talking about last week when I saw that Norman Mailer documentary, and I walked out of that theater so enthusiastic, and it gave me a whole new energy of just, wow. It's been a while since I felt this rejuvenated from a film, and now I saw this film, and the director, well, the film itself, this is Between the Temples. And I was like, the director, Nathan Silver, I'm like, that name sounds so familiar. And I saw that Factory 25 were reposting an article kind of about, I didn't read the article. I probably should have saved it in retrospect because I didn't even know if I was going to talk about this film or not. Let me get a sip of this coffee here. But it's kind of talking about the evolution of, I would assume, I guess these mumblecore films or mumblecore kind of directors, what they would have actually kind of morphed into, or what these kinds of films would have actually morphed into. I've mentioned before, filmmakers like A.G. Bujalski, who I've always probably mispronounced his name, and Aaron Katz, of course the Duplass brothers. They've all had varying degrees of success and different kinds of films and other kind of projects. And Nathan Silver, I was like, the name sounded familiar, and I was like, you know what? I have that collection that Factory 25 put out. It's the Totally Wicked 3-film set from Nathan Silver, and I was like, wow, that is cool, man. I didn't even know that I didn't even connect it at first, and then I was like, wow. Let me see if I can get the names of the films up here. There we go. Or is it not Totally Wicked? Or Totally Wired, I'm sorry. I was looking up Totally Wicked, and it wasn't coming up. So that's why I was like, I had to type in the full thing. But Exit Elena, Soft in the Head, and Stinking Heaven. And these films, now that I have the context of this, it makes me, I shouldn't say excited, because I don't see the point of getting excited, because you're just setting yourself up for unrealistic expectations at that point. I'm saying in terms of getting excited for a film. I want to watch the film as open as I can, without any kind of preconceived notions. But Between the Temples, it's a wonderful film. It's one of the best films I've seen this year. And taking that evolution of mumblecore, this feels like a mumblecore film at its heart. But unlike a lot of those, I think this is a little more closer to something of a traditional narrative. And I say that with an asterisk because it's not exactly a strict ABC narrative, but it doesn't drift as much as perhaps a lot of those films. It's definitely kind of difficult to recommend certain films from that era because you're either going to be really with it or you're really not. And when I first saw them, I really didn't know what to make of them. But as I went on and started to see more and was understanding the very low-key, very borderline improvisational style of it, is when I really started to get on board. And certain films, like I mentioned before, Funny Ha Ha being just one of my favorite films, but so tricky to recommend because it's like you're either going to be on board with it or you're not. And Between the Temples, it has those feelings where you just have these characters. Maybe Jason Schwartzman, he plays Ben Gottlieb, and he's not exactly unlikable, but he definitely feels like one of these types of characters where he's just kind of there, he's just kind of drifting. Him and the wonderful Carol Kane, they form a friendship. Without getting too much into it, he ends up helping her out with something. With something that isn't exactly looked greatly upon by everybody else. They're having kind of an ambiguous relationship from the outside. There's a really wonderful scene when he ends up staying over her house. Her character's name is Carla, and her son comes home, and it's a great kind of a great kind of encounter where the dialogue. Oh, good lord, brother! Hope you guys weren't listening to my headphones. Goodness gracious. I apologize about that. I dropped something, but it's a great dialogue that kind of runs on top of each other. And actually, I didn't even notice here, but Keith Poulsen, who I've also mentioned before on the show, apparently he was in the film, but I don't remember him. But he's been in other kind of mumblecore-ish films. I mentioned him. He was in another kind of mumblecore-ish film earlier this year, which is The Feeling That the Time for Doing Something Has Passed. But he's also in Francis Ferguson and Somebody Up There Likes Me. And again, and Little Sister, which is actually a pretty underappreciated film with Addison Timlin and Ali Sheedy. And it's actually a pretty good film that I think no one really talks about. I'd recommend that one. Interesting film about a girl that comes home. She wants to be a nun. And she has this relationship where she's trying to get closer to her brother who has this kind of deformity, and all he does is he just plays. Oh, you're gonna notice a cut. That's never happened before, where the microphone cut out mid-sentence, but we're gonna go right back into it. So I'm talking about he's into heavy metal and stuff, and they kind of start to get closer as a brother and sister. She was trying to get closer to him, but he's been very distant. It's a good film, but Between the Temples, it's got some of the tropes that I wouldn't say tropes. It's got more some of the kind of things you would find in those mumblecore kind of films, specifically with a lot of the camera work, where you have kind of bizarre sort of shots and entire sequences that in a traditional film it would be a big no-no. It'd be like, you can't do that. The characters are just having a conversation. It's very tight, close-up shots. And it feels almost claustrophobic, but you're just cutting back these people's faces, and there's a whole sequence when he is hallucinating and is with Carla, which in a traditional kind of film they'd be like, no, we got to cut that out. This is just a ridiculous sequence. And these kinds of films have a far more relaxed attitude, and this one has that plot, those plot elements, but it's not as concerned with that. It's very much, I wouldn't even say in the background, but at a certain point, once that's established, it's more so about kind of connecting these characters and having these great kind of sequences all together. And one actor I really want to point out, and another film I was going to talk about, but I will probably not get an opportunity to before the end of the episode, if I can find her on here, which I don't think I'll be able to, so I have to look her up from another film. Anyways, but bear with me, guys. Should I just pause it? I may have to, because I really want to find that actor's name. I'm going to have to pause it. Don't you worry, I found the name. Wonderful performance by Dolly DeLeon And I was like, and what's great is that, so I originally saw her in Triangle of Sadness. If you guys have seen that, she plays Abigail. She is the one who becomes the main kind of character in the third act of the film. Very memorable performance, the way she starts manipulating the other people there. And then I also saw her this year in a film, I don't even know if I talked about it on the show or not, but one of the most endearing and touching films of the year, which was Ghostlight, which maybe I mentioned it when I was talking about Robot Dreams because I saw them back to back. I don't know, but she is in this film as well, and she is just a wonderful, wonderful actor. I love seeing her pop up in these films. Between the performance she has in here as a almost condescending sort of character, just not happy with anything. It's just great, man. I love these interactions. It's one of my favorite sequences in the film is towards the end when they're all around a dinner table and they're all having this revealing kind of conversation. It's just so nice. Jason Schwartzman as well has been one of my favorite actors for quite some time. He has a lot of range that people may know him from a certain kind of film, but just watching him, and actually he's going to be in Megalopolis as well, which is really great. Looking forward to that. It's going to be really cool that he's in that. But he's wonderful as well. Robert Smeagol, who, let's say Smeagol, like guy named Lord of the Rings, plays Rabbi Bruce. There's a lot of actors I didn't recognize. Madeline Weinstein plays his character Gabby, who becomes, at first you think of her as one way, and then it's very funny. Her character becomes like this, I don't even know how to describe it. She becomes like very, what's the word I want to look for? She gets very, very interested in Jason Schwartzman's character in a very bizarre way. There's a whole sequence in a car that in another film you go like, what is going on here? But it just works because the film as well is just so consistently funny. I mean, I was laughing pretty consistently throughout, and a couple hard laughs too. And it's when I watch a film like this and just see these very dry performances with Jason Schwartzman's character who's just pretty much annoyed with everybody, and when he tries to be sincere with everybody else, it comes off as very stilted and awkward. And it's just Carol Kane as well is just so well done. She's so good in the film. She plays this character who has her own kind of quirks, but not in an obnoxious way where you'd be like, who no one would be with this character. It's an endearing way where she's definitely a little off, but she's very likable. But even she's kind of on the outside. There's a great part where he kind of tries to confide in her, and she's kind of distant in a very funny way. It's just one of these films where I walked out of the cinema and I was just like, wow, for all the poor films you see where you're like, man, what is going on here? Not that you wasted any time. but you're just like, man, I mean, there's just some films I've seen recently. I can't even call them films. These are just movies, man. I can see some movies recently. I'm just like, man, what are we doing here, man? This is just nonsense. But then you see a film like this, and it's just like, wow, this is actually like a wonderful film. And actually, funnily enough, I guess I can kind of briefly talk about it, because that same night I also saw Sing Sing, which was it was a good film. I didn't quite love it, but it did remind me, coincidentally, of Ghostlight because of that aspect of these characters putting on a play and dealing with their own personal lives, where with Ghostlight you have the characters in that film who are dealing with a tragedy in their past. The father giving one of the year's best performances by Keith Kupferer, who plays his character Dan. He has, you get the sense he's burying a lot of anger with him. When it comes out, it's very explosive, and he just is like a ball of like just rage and energy. But he's good. For the most part, he's good at kind of maintaining it until he's not. But he ends up, unbeknownst to him, ends up joining this kind of local theater group, and they're putting on a play of Romeo and Juliet, and it's all these it's a lot of like older people in the cast, different kind of people, and it's a way that he is using that kind of as therapy to deal with this tragedy. His whole family is kind of reeling with this tragedy in their own ways. We have two great performances by Tara Mallon and Catherine Mallon. Kupfer, which actually, as I'm saying this now, I didn't realize all three of these people are related. Oh my goodness. Wow. That's wild. Well, great family of actors. Okay, awesome. Presumably, so they all have the same name. I don't know why they would. Wouldn't that be a hell of a coincidence? Should I have looked this up beforehand? Sure. Am I going to stop the pause to look it up now? Absolutely not. But just bear with me. but it's just how they're all dealing with this tragedy. And I like is that at first we have Catherine, who's playing this character Daisy, and at first I'm like, this character's gonna be annoying. She's gonna be an annoying teen where she's trying to be quirky and funny, and the writing's just not gonna be. Not that I'm making these assumptions, but in my head I'm thinking like, you see films where they desperately want you to think a character is quirky and funny, but they're really just obnoxious and annoying, and I'm like, it's gonna be one of these, but it's not. She has more depth to her, and Sharon, played by Tara Mallon, she has more depth to her. And there's just a one moment at the end of this film when they all are together, and it's just so endearing and so touching. It's never melodramatic. I mean, the plot itself, the way it connects this play, I mean, you're either going to get with it or not, but I think by the point where we basically kind of find out what's going on, to me it worked because it was built up so well in the film, and even when we get to a certain scene, like which is this film has these elements that in a lesser film would be more noticeable, where you have a scene of exposition at the end where the characters basically are revealing entirely what's going on. In a lesser film, you could say, okay, these characters are just revealing this exposition. In the context of here, it works, and because of the goodwill this film had, it works as well. I mean, the film is funny for sure. It is, it's definitely a comedy, but I think it's just an incredibly heartfelt drama, a very emotional film. But it's never dour. It's never melodramatic. It's just a really, really touching film that by the end of it, it completely won me over. Not that at the start I was like, whatever, but the way I felt at the beginning and the way I felt at the end, it was just like, wow, I was almost in tears at the end of this film. I thought it was so touching. And again, one of the best films of the year. So it's these films you really want to seek out more than the noise fests at your local multiplex. I love the multiplex. I love going to those, don't get me wrong, but I mean, a film like Between the Temples or Ghostlight or the Norman Mailer documentary, I mean, these are the films that stick with me more than just, just a Hollywood noise factory. But they serve their purpose. I'm not dogging on them. I'm just saying for myself, I've just seen some really, really excellent, wonderful films lately, and these are just a couple of them. So I think I might be a little short on time, but because the thing paused, I don't know exactly my time frame is. So I'm going to go ahead and probably end it right there. It might be a little early, but I think I kind of said what I wanted to say anyways. So I was happy to talk about these two recent films. Some great titles out today. Keep an eye on those. And that's all I got, man. And I appreciate everybody listening to the new Peephole Pictures episode. That was a lot of fun to do. Dracula Sucks. It's a wild film. It's a fun film, and I was really happy to talk about it, man. It's a cool film. So check that out if you're interested in that sort of thing. But that's all I got, guys. Hey, thank you so much. It's a wonderful day out. Dude's mowing his lawn across the street at 6:30 at night. I don't know what that's about, but hey, we all got to get the job done at some point. So thank you so much. God bless everything. Goodbye.